The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the weathered buildings of Redemption Valley as a lone rider emerged from the mountain pass. The town sat nestled in a narrow canyon, protected on three sides by towering cliffs that seemed to reach toward heaven itself. It was the kind of place men came to disappear, to start over, to leave their past buried in the dust behind them. The stranger on the black horse was tall and lean, wearing a dark coat that had seen better days and a hat pulled low over his eyes. Two Colt .45s hung at his sides in well-worn holsters, and there was something in the way he sat his saddle that spoke of a man comfortable with violence, even if he didn't seek it out. As he rode down the main street, the few people visible quickly ducked into buildings or hurried away. Shop windows that had been displaying goods suddenly had their shutters drawn. The saloon, which should have been busy at this hour, looked empty except for a single bartender who watched nervously from behind the bar. The stranger, who went by the name Jacob Cross these days, noticed the fear in the air like smoke from a distant fire. He'd seen it before in towns where something terrible had happened, where people lived with the constant expectation that the worst was yet to come. He dismounted in front of the hotel, a two-story building that looked like it had been constructed hastily and maintained reluctantly. The porch creaked under his boots as he climbed the steps, spurs jingling softly with each movement. The hotel clerk was a nervous man in his 50s with thinning hair and hands that shook as he pushed the register across the scarred wooden counter. "Name?" he asked without looking up. "Cross. Jacob Cross." The clerk's hand froze above the ledger. His eyes flicked up to meet Jacob's, and the stranger saw something there that surprised him. Not just fear, but recognition. You wouldn't be related to Ezra Cross, would you?" the clerk whispered. Jacob's jaw tightened. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 5 years, not since the day Ezra Cross had supposedly died in a hail of bullets outside the bank in Silver Creek. "Might be. Why do you ask?" The clerk's face went white. "No reason. No reason at all. Just a coincidence, I'm sure." He fumbled with the key, dropping it twice before finally sliding it across the counter. Room 12. Top of the stairs, end of the hall. As Jacob climbed the narrow staircase, he could hear the clerk whispering urgently to someone in the back room. Word would spread quickly through a town this size. A stranger had arrived, and his name was Cross. By morning, everyone would know. The room was small and simple, a bed, a washstand, a single window that looked out over the main street. Jacob set his saddlebags on the bed and moved to the window, studying the town below. Redemption Valley had maybe 200 residents, all living in the shadow of the surrounding mountains, like prisoners in a natural fortress. But it wasn't the geography that kept people here. It was something else, something that made them afraid to look strangers in the eye, something that made them scurry for cover when an unknown rider came to town. Jacob had come to Redemption Valley for a reason, though it wasn't one he was ready to share with anyone. 4 or 5 years, he'd been running from his past, trying to become someone different, someone better. But the past had a way of catching up, and now it was time to stop running. As darkness fell over the valley, Jacob made his way to the saloon. The Broken Wheel was the kind of establishment that served watered-down whiskey and asked no questions about its customers' backgrounds. The bartender, a large man with arms like tree trunks and scars across his knuckles, looked up warily as Jacob entered. "Whiskey," Jacob said, settling onto a bar stool. The bartender poured without comment, but Jacob could feel him watching, measuring, trying to decide if this stranger represented opportunity or threat. Around the room, a handful of men sat at tables, their conversations too quiet to overhear, but their glances frequent and nervous. "Quiet town," Jacob observed, taking a sip of the whiskey. It was better than he'd expected. "We like it that way," the bartender replied. "Folks here value their privacy. I can appreciate that. Sometimes a man needs a place where he can leave his troubles behind." The bartender studied Jacob's face in the mirror behind the bar. Sometimes troubles don't stay behind. Sometimes they follow a man wherever he goes. Before Jacob could respond, the saloon door swung open and a woman entered. She was perhaps 30 years old, with auburn hair pinned up in a practical style and green eyes that missed nothing. Her dress was simple but well made, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone accustomed to authority. "Evening, Sarah," the bartender said, his tone respectful. "Evening, Tom." She looked directly at Jacob. "You must be the stranger everyone's talking about." Word travels fast in a small town, especially when that stranger shares a name with someone we'd all rather forget. She moved closer, her voice dropping. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. I run the general store, and I serve on the town council. We don't get many visitors here, Mr. Cross." "I'm just passing through." "Are you?" Sarah's eyes searched his face, because the last man who came through here with the name Cross brought nothing but death and misery. I'd hate to think history was about to repeat itself. Jacob set down his glass carefully. "What happened to this other Cross?" Sarah glanced around the saloon. The other patrons were trying to look like they weren't listening, but the tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ezra Cross rode into Redemption Valley 5 years ago," she said quietly. "He was running from something, the law, other outlaws. We never found out what. He seemed harmless enough at first, kept to himself, paid his bills. But then things started happening." "What kind of things?" "Robberies. 3 banks in nearby towns hit within a month. Always the same pattern. 1 man, 2 guns, in and out before anyone could react. And always, someone would spot a rider heading back toward our valley afterward." Jacob felt his stomach tighten. He remembered those robberies, remembered the desperation that had driven him to them, the way his brother Ezra had convinced him they had no choice. "The territorial marshal came looking for him," Sarah continued. "Found him right here in the saloon. There was a gunfight. Ezra was fast, but not fast enough. He took 3 bullets and died right there on the floor." She pointed to a spot near the bar where Jacob could see dark stains in the wooden planks, stains that no amount of scrubbing had been able to remove. "We thought it was over," Sarah said. "But then the hauntings started." "Hauntings?" "Ezra Cross didn't stay dead, Mr. Cross. People started seeing him, riding through town at night, standing in the cemetery, watching from the hills. And wherever he appeared, trouble followed. Livestock killed, buildings burned, people terrorized in their homes." Jacob felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "You're talking about a ghost." "I'm talking about something that should be dead but isn't. Something that won't rest until it finishes whatever business brought it here in the first place." Sarah leaned closer. "So I'll ask you again. What brings a man named Cross to Redemption Valley?" Before Jacob could answer, the saloon doors crashed open and a young man stumbled in, his clothes torn and his face pale with terror. "He's back," the man gasped. "The ghost of Ezra Cross. I saw him up at the old mine. He was just standing there watching me. And when I turned to run," he laughed. "God help me," he laughed. The saloon erupted in frightened voices. Men reached for guns, women crossed themselves, and the bartender began pouring drinks with shaking hands. But Jacob sat perfectly still, his mind racing with implications and possibilities. The ghost of Ezra Cross, his brother, who was supposed to be dead, was apparently still terrorizing the town that had killed him. But Jacob knew something the others didn't. He knew Ezra better than anyone, and he knew that his brother was far too stubborn to let a little thing like death stop him from getting revenge. The question was, what was Jacob going to do about it? The next morning dawned gray and cold, with storm clouds gathering over the peaks surrounding Redemption Valley. Jacob stood at his hotel window, watching the townspeople go about their morning routines with the quick, nervous movements of prey animals sensing a predator nearby. A soft knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it to find Sarah Mitchell standing in the hallway, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands and a determined expression on her face. "I brought you coffee," she said, "and I think we need to talk." Jacob stepped aside to let her enter. She handed him the cup and moved to the window, looking out at the street below. "I've been thinking about what you said last night," she began. "Or rather, what you didn't say. When I mentioned Ezra Cross, I saw something in your eyes. Recognition." Jacob sipped his coffee, buying time. "It's not an uncommon name." "Maybe not. But the way you reacted, that was personal." She turned to face him. "Who are you really, Jacob Cross?" Jacob studied her face, seeing intelligence and strength, but also fear. This woman was carrying a burden, and he suspected it had to do with more than just ghost stories. "I'm someone who made mistakes," he said finally. "Someone who's been running from his past for 5 years, trying to become a better man." "And Ezra Cross?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment. Outside, church bells began to ring, calling the faithful to Sunday service. "Ezra Cross was my brother." Sarah's breath caught. "Your brother?" "My older brother. My idol, my partner, my worst mistake." Jacob set down his coffee cup and moved to the window. "He taught me how to ride, how to shoot, how to survive in a world that didn't much care whether we lived or died. He also taught me how to steal, how to lie, and how to kill when necessary. The bank robberies. I was there for all of them. Ezra planned them, but I was his partner. We thought we were unstoppable, thought we were too smart and too fast for the law to catch us." Jacob's voice was bitter with regret. "We were wrong." Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing this revelation. "So when the marshal came for Ezra, I was out of town, scouting our next target. By the time I got back, he was already dead and buried. I rode out that same night and never looked back. But now you're here. Now I'm here." Jacob turned to meet her eyes. "Because I heard the stories about his ghost, and I know my brother well enough to know that he wouldn't rest easy, even in death. There's something keeping him tied to this place, something unfinished." Sarah moved closer. "What kind of something?" "That's what I need to find out. But first, I need to know more about what happened when he died. The official story and the real story." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, clearly wrestling with how much to reveal. Finally, she seemed to reach a decision. "The official story is that Marshal Tom Bradley tracked Ezra here and killed him in a fair fight. But there were complications." "What kind of complications?" "Money, Mr. Cross. A lot of money. The banks that were robbed had posted substantial rewards for Ezra's capture, dead or alive. But when they searched his body and his belongings, the stolen money was never found." Jacob felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. How much money? Nearly $50,000, accumulated from all 3 robberies. Enough to set a man up for life, or to cause a lot of trouble if it fell into the wrong hands. And Marshal Bradley? Retired shortly after killing Ezra. Bought himself a nice ranch down in Texas, far from here. Said he was tired of the outlaw life and wanted to settle down. Jacob nodded slowly. The picture was becoming clearer. Who else knew about the missing money? The bank officials, a few members of the town council, Marshal Bradley. Sarah hesitated. "And me." "You." "I was engaged to Marshal Bradley at the time. He confided in me about the case, told me about the missing money and his theories about where it might be hidden. And then he left town. Sarah's voice was sad but not surprised. 3 days after the funeral, he packed up and rode out. Left me a letter saying he needed a fresh start somewhere far away from the memories." Jacob studied her face, seeing the hurt she was trying to hide. "But you don't think he went looking for a fresh start?" "I think he went looking for $50,000 in stolen money, and I think he found it." Before Jacob could respond, the sound of hoofbeats echoed from the street below. They both moved to the window and saw a lone rider approaching at full gallop, his horse lathered with sweat and his face wild with fear. The rider dismounted in front of the hotel and ran inside. Moments later, they could hear him shouting in the lobby below. "He's back. The ghost of Ezra Cross. I saw him at Bradley's old place, going through the ruins. He was searching for something." Jacob and Sarah exchanged glances. Bradley's old place, the marshal's house, had burned down 3 years ago under mysterious circumstances. If Ezra's ghost was searching there, it could only mean one thing. "The money," Sarah whispered. "He's looking for the money Bradley stole." Jacob was already reaching for his gun belt. "Then it's time I had a talk with my brother." "You can't be serious. If Ezra really is what they say he is, then he's still my brother, and I'm the only one who might be able to reason with him." Jacob strapped on his guns and headed for the door. "Besides, there are some questions only he can answer." Sarah grabbed his arm. What if he doesn't want to talk? What if he wants revenge? Jacob paused at the door, his hand on the knob. Then I guess we'll find out if ghosts can die twice. As they left the hotel, Jacob's mind was racing with possibilities and plans. The missing money, the corrupt marshal, the ghost sightings. It all pointed to unfinished business that went far beyond simple haunting. But there was something else bothering him, something that didn't quite fit with the ghost story. If Ezra really was dead, if he really was some kind of supernatural entity seeking revenge, why hadn't he simply revealed the truth about the missing money years ago? Why the mysterious appearances, the terror tactics, the gradual escalation? Unless Ezra Cross wasn't dead at all. The thought hit Jacob like a physical blow. What if the ghost of Redemption Valley wasn't a ghost at all, but a very much alive outlaw who had been hiding in the mountains for 5 years, waiting for the right moment to reclaim what was rightfully his? And if that was true, then Jacob was walking into a confrontation with a brother who had every reason to want him dead. The ruins of Marshall Bradley's house sat on a hill overlooking Redemption Valley, charred timbers and crumbling stone foundations marking where a substantial home had once stood. As Jacob and Sarah approached on horseback, the late afternoon sun cast eerie shadows through the skeletal remains of what had been the marshal's pride and joy. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked as they dismounted near the ruins. "If your brother really is alive, if he's been hiding out here for 5 years, then it's time we settled things between us," Jacob replied, checking his guns one final time. "You should wait here with the horses." "Like hell I should. If Ezra Cross has been terrorizing this town for 5 years, I have as much right to face him as you do." Jacob looked at her determined expression and realized there was no point in arguing. Sarah Mitchell was clearly not the type of woman who backed down from a fight, even when that fight involved potentially supernatural forces. They made their way carefully through the ruins, stepping over fallen beams and around piles of rubble. The house had been impressive in its day. 2 stories, with a wraparound porch and large windows that would have provided commanding views of the valley below. Now it was a monument to destruction and decay. "Over here," Sarah whispered, pointing to a section of the foundation where the stones had been recently disturbed. "Someone's been digging." Jacob knelt beside the excavation, studying the fresh earth and scattered rocks. The hole was maybe 3 feet deep and twice as wide, clearly the result of systematic searching rather than random vandalism. "Looking for something buried," he murmured. "Something hidden when the house was built, or stored here later. The money, maybe, or something else entirely." A sound from deeper in the ruins made them both freeze, the soft scrape of boot leather against stone, measured and deliberate. Someone was moving through the wreckage, someone who was trying to be quiet, but not entirely succeeding. Jacob drew his guns in one smooth motion, the familiar weight of the Colt steady in his hands. Beside him, Sarah pulled a small pistol from her coat pocket, her face set with grim determination. "I know you're there," Jacob called out, his voice carrying clearly through the ruins. "Might as well show yourself, Ezra." Silence stretched for long moments, broken only by the wind whistling through the broken timbers. Then, from behind a partially collapsed wall, a figure emerged. Jacob's breath caught in his throat. It was Ezra, but not the Ezra he remembered. His brother was thinner than he'd been 5 years ago, his face gaunt and weathered by exposure to the elements. His clothes were rough and patched, the garments of a man who'd been living rough in the mountains. But his eyes still held the same cold intelligence that had made him such a dangerous outlaw. "Hello, little brother," Ezra said, his voice carrying the familiar hint of mockery that Jacob remembered so well. "Took you long enough to find me." Ezra. Jacob kept his guns trained on his brother, though part of him wanted to lower them, wanted to believe this could be a simple reunion. "You're supposed to be dead." "Supposed to be, yes. But you know what they say about the best-laid plans." Ezra stepped closer, his own hands resting casually near his gun belts. "Marshal Bradley thought he'd killed me, put 3 bullets in my chest, and watched me fall. Problem was, he was in such a hurry to search my body for the money that he didn't check to make sure I was actually dead. The money that was never found. The money that was never found because I'd already hidden it." Ezra's smile was cold. You always were the smart one, Jacob. I figured you'd work it out eventually. Sarah stepped forward, her pistol steady despite the tremor in her voice. You've been terrorizing this town for 5 years. Killing livestock, burning buildings, frightening innocent people. Why? Ezra glanced at her dismissively. And you must be the Marshal's abandoned fiancée. Sarah Mitchell, isn't it? Tom told me all about you before he died. Before he died? Sarah's face went pale. But Tom left town, moved to Texas. Tom Bradley never made it out of Colorado territory, Ezra said flatly. I caught up with him about 50 miles south of here, convinced him to tell me where he'd hidden my money. Turns out he'd buried it right here, under his own house, figuring it was the last place anyone would look. Jacob felt sick. You killed him. He killed me first. Or tried to. Fair's fair, little brother. And the ghost stories? The hauntings? Ezra laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humor. Amazing what people will believe when they're scared enough. A few midnight rides through town, some mysterious figures glimpsed in the shadows, livestock killed with a distinctive pattern. Before long, the whole valley was convinced that the vengeful spirit of Ezra Cross was stalking them. But why? Sarah demanded. If you had the money, why didn't you just leave? Why terrorize innocent people? Because innocent people killed me. Ezra snarled, his calm facade cracking. This town celebrated when Marshal Bradley put bullets in my chest. They cheered when they thought I was dead. Well, I decided to give them something to really fear. Jacob saw the madness in his brother's eyes, the way 5 years of isolation and hatred had twisted him into something barely recognizable. It's over, Ezra. Time to let it go. Over. Ezra's hand moved closer to his gun. It's not over until I say it's over. Until everyone in this valley pays for what they did to me. They didn't do anything to you. You robbed banks, Ezra. You brought the law down on yourself. We robbed banks, Ezra corrected. Don't try to play the saint now, little brother. You were there for every job, every bullet, every terrified bank clerk begging for his life. Jacob felt the weight of those old sins pressing down on him. You're right. I was there, and I've regretted it every day since. But that doesn't give you the right to terrorize innocent people. Innocent? Ezra laughed bitterly. There's no such thing as innocent people, Jacob. There are just people who haven't been caught yet. The confrontation was building toward violence. Jacob could feel it in the air like electricity before a thunderstorm. His brother was beyond reason, twisted by years of hatred and isolation into something dangerous and unpredictable. Walk away, Ezra, Jacob said quietly. Take your money and disappear. Find somewhere far from here and try to build a life that doesn't involve hurting people. Like you did. Ezra's smile was sharp as a knife blade. How's that working out for you, brother? Still having nightmares about the people we killed? Still seeing their faces when you close your eyes? Jacob felt his jaw tighten. Every night. But I'm trying to be better than I was. Better. Ezra spat. There's no better, Jacob. There's only stronger and weaker, predator and prey. And I'm done being prey. The gunfight erupted without warning. Ezra's hands moved like lightning, his Colts clearing leather in a motion so fast it seemed almost supernatural. But Jacob was ready, his own weapons already drawn, and 5 years of practice had made him faster than he'd ever been. The first exchange of shots echoed through the ruins like thunder. Ezra's bullets whined past Jacob's head, close enough to burn his cheek. Jacob's shots were more accurate. One bullet shattered Ezra's left shoulder, spinning him around and sending him stumbling back toward the excavation. But Ezra was far from finished. Using his good arm, he continued firing, forcing Jacob and Sarah to dive for cover behind a fallen beam. Bullets splintered wood and chipped stone around them as Ezra pressed his attack with the desperate fury of a cornered animal. You can't win this, Ezra. Jacob shouted over the gunfire. There's nowhere to run. Then we'll finish it here. Ezra's voice was raw with pain and rage, just like we should have finished it 5 years ago. The gunfight raged through the ruins, brother against brother, past against present, with the weight of years of guilt and anger behind every shot. and in the distance, drawn by the sound of gunfire, the people of Redemption Valley were coming to witness the final confrontation between the living and the dead. The gunfight had reached a deadly stalemate. Ezra had taken cover behind the remains of a stone chimney, blood streaming from his wounded shoulder, but his gun hand still steady. Jacob and Sarah were pinned down behind fallen timbers, unable to advance without exposing themselves to Ezra's deadly accurate fire. "This is madness," Sarah called out during a brief lull in the shooting. "He's wounded and outnumbered. Why doesn't he surrender?" "Because surrender was never in Ezra's vocabulary," Jacob replied grimly. "He'd rather die fighting than live as a prisoner." As if to prove his point, Ezra's voice rang out from behind the chimney. "You know how this ends, little brother. One of us walks away, and one of us doesn't. Just like the old days." "It doesn't have to be like the old days," Jacob shouted back. "We can be better than what we were." Ezra's laughter was harsh and bitter. "Better? I spent 5 years hiding in caves and eating scraps, watching this town prosper while they thought they'd killed me. There's no better, Jacob. There's only payback." The sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. A group of townspeople was riding hard toward the ruins, men with rifles, women with determined expressions, children old enough to understand that their long nightmare might finally be coming to an end. Among them, Jacob recognized the hotel clerk, the bartender from the saloon, Father Miguel from the church, and at least a dozen others. They formed a rough semicircle around the ruins, their weapons trained on the chimney where Ezra had taken cover. "Ezra Cross," called out the hotel clerk, his voice shaking but determined. "You've terrorized this town long enough. Surrender now, and we'll see that you get a fair trial." "A fair trial?" Ezra's voice dripped with contempt. "Like the fair trial you gave me 5 years ago? I think not." Without warning, Ezra broke from cover, firing rapidly as he ran toward the excavation where he'd been searching for the hidden money. His desperate gambit caught everyone off guard. Townspeople dove for cover. Horses reared and whinnied in fear, and for a moment, chaos reigned in the ruins. Jacob saw his opportunity. While Ezra was focused on the townspeople, Jacob sprinted across the open ground toward his brother's position. Sarah's covering fire kept Ezra's head down just long enough for Jacob to close the distance. The two brothers collided near the edge of the excavation, wrestling for control of Ezra's gun. They rolled across the uneven ground, kicking up dust and debris, each trying to gain the advantage over the other. "You were always the favorite," Ezra snarled as they struggled. "Always the one who could do no wrong in Father's eyes." "Father died when we were children," Jacob gasped, trying to wrench the gun from his brother's grasp. "This isn't about him. Everything is about him." Ezra's eyes were wild with long-suppressed pain and rage. "He loved you more, trusted you more, believed in you more. And look how that turned out. You became an outlaw just like me." Jacob finally managed to knock the gun from Ezra's hand, but his brother immediately pulled a knife from his boot. The blade flashed in the fading sunlight as Ezra lunged forward, desperation giving him strength despite his wounded shoulder. They grappled at the edge of the excavation, teetering on the brink of the hole that Ezra had dug while searching for his stolen treasure. Jacob could see madness in his brother's eyes, the look of a man who had lost everything and was determined to take others down with him. "It's over, Ezra," Jacob said, trying to reason with his brother even as they fought. "The money, the revenge, all of it, it's over. Let it go." "Never." Ezra pressed his attack with the knife, forcing Jacob to give ground. "This town owes me. They all owe me. They don't owe you anything." Jacob caught his brother's wrist, stopping the knife inches from his throat. "You chose the outlaw life, Ezra. You chose the robberies, the violence, the running. Nobody forced you." For a moment, something flickered in Ezra's eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or the ghost of the brother he had once been. But then it was gone, replaced by cold determination. "Then I guess we both chose wrong," Ezra said quietly. With his free hand, he grabbed Jacob's gun from its holster, but instead of pointing it at his brother, Ezra turned the weapon toward the townspeople who had gathered to watch the confrontation. "If I'm going to hell," Ezra said, "I'm taking some of them with me." Jacob saw what his brother intended and reacted without thinking. He threw himself forward, knocking Ezra off balance, just as the gun fired. The bullet went wide, harmlessly striking the ground, but the movement sent both brothers tumbling into the excavation. They hit the bottom of the hole hard, but Ezra took the worst of it. His head struck a buried stone with a sickening crack, and he lay still, blood pooling beneath him. Jacob crawled over to his brother, checking for signs of life. Ezra's eyes fluttered open, focusing with difficulty on Jacob's face. "Little brother," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I'm here, Ezra. Don't try to talk." Always trying to save me." Ezra's smile was sad and tired, even when I didn't deserve saving. "You're my brother." That never stopped mattering. Ezra's hand fumbled in his coat pocket, pulling out a small leather pouch. "The money," he gasped. "Never spent a penny of it. Never brought me anything but misery." Jacob took the pouch, feeling the weight of coins and paper bills inside. "What do you want me to do with it?" "Give it back," Ezra whispered. "To the banks, to the families, to whoever it belongs to. Make it right, Jacob. Make it all right. Ezra, promise me." His brother's grip on Jacob's arm was surprisingly strong. "Promise me you'll make it right." "I promise." Ezra smiled, and for a moment he looked like the brother Jacob remembered from their childhood, before the war, before the desperation, before the choices that had led them both down such dark paths. "Good," Ezra whispered. That's good." His eyes closed, and his breathing grew shallow and irregular. Within minutes, Ezra Cross was truly dead, taking with him the ghost that had haunted Redemption Valley for 5 long years. Epilogue: A New Beginning. 2 weeks later, Jacob stood in the cemetery overlooking Redemption Valley, watching his father Miguel finish the burial service for Ezra Cross. A simple wooden headstone marked the grave, bearing only his brother's name and the dates of his birth and death. No epithets, no judgments, just the basic facts of a life that had ended too soon and too violently. The townspeople had surprised Jacob with their forgiveness. When he'd offered to return the stolen money, they had voted to use it to build a new school and improve the church. When he'd offered to leave town and never return, they had asked him to stay. "The past is past," Sarah had told him. "What matters now is what you choose to do with your future." Jacob had chosen to stay, to help rebuild what his brother's reign of terror had damaged, to find some measure of redemption and service to the community he and Ezra had wronged. It wouldn't erase the past, wouldn't bring back the people they had killed or undo the suffering they had caused. But it was a start. As the crowd dispersed, Sarah approached and stood beside him at the graveside. "Any regrets?" she asked. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the brother he'd loved and lost, about the choices that had led them both to this place, about the long road ahead. "Only that it took so long to find my way home," he said finally. Together, they walked down from the cemetery toward the town below, where people were going about their daily lives without fear for the first time in 5 years. The ghost of Redemption Valley was finally at rest, and the living could begin the work of building something better from the ashes of the past. Behind them, the wind whispered through the cemetery grass, carrying with it the promise that some stories, no matter how dark they begin, can still find their way to redemption in the end.